next one will focus on water in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you. So on our agenda today, we'll do a quick round of welcome and introductions to the panelists. We will then move into a short presentation for 10 minutes on our recent research, which focused on the overview of roadmaps and plans for the forestry sector in British Columbia. We'll then move into our moderated panel discussion, and we'll finish off with a Q&A and closing remarks. We do encourage you to share your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box as well, and our moderator and myself will be monitoring those to make sure they get answered. So I'll pass it over to our guest speakers to introduce themselves. Maybe start with Gurminder, then Neil, then James, and then David.
Okay, thank you, Catriona, for the introduction. So yeah, I'm Gurminder Minhas. I'm the Managing Director of Performance Biofilaments. Performance Biofilaments is a biomaterials company. We're focused on developing applications for nanofibrillated cellulose. Nanofibrillated cellulose comes from kraft pulp, which Canada is a big producer of. And we take this material and mechanically delaminate it and convert it into nanoform. Currently, we're at lab and pilot scale, and our commercial facility, which was actually announced by Resolute Forest Products, one of our shareholders, is currently under construction in the province of Quebec. And that facility is going to be 5,000 tons per year of NFC. It's going to come online next year, basically. Prior to Performance Biofilaments, I was with a company called Lignol Innovations, looking to develop biorefineries for production of cellulosic ethanol and lignin-based chemicals. And then prior to that, I was with Canfor Pulp. I spent 11 years there. Started off as a research technician and ended up the last 5.5 years running the pulp and paper research group, as well as doing technical marketing.
So I'm Neil Huff. So I'm the Vice President of Business Development at FP Innovations. Previously, I've been a Cleantech entrepreneur for about the last 20 years, primarily in batteries and fuel cells. I'm new to the sector. I've been with FP Innovations for about 1.5 years. So FP Innovations is a not-for-profit research organization, and our mission is really to enhance competitiveness in the sector, in the Canadian sector, and create opportunities for high value-added product growth in new markets. We've got about 350 employees based primarily in Montreal and Vancouver. And our key funding is from the forest company member companies, federal government, primarily through NRCan, and provincial governments across the country, but primarily BC and Quebec. So we're creating platforms and applications around cellulose and lignin in both their basic and transformed states. Previously, we've developed technology around cellulose nanocrystals, cellulose filaments, LignoForce, which is our kraft lignin technology, and TMP Bio for H-lignin. And all 4 of them have resulted in partnerships with major forestry companies and investments of $25 to $50 million for pilot and pre-production facilities. And we're currently working on a lot of different applications, biodegradable plastic composites, filtration materials, so mask materials for biodegradable masks, concrete, emulsions, asphalt, animal feed, wood adhesives, you name it. We've got a lot of projects on the way, but certainly the big game will be the transformation of lignin and sugars to functional chemicals and monomers, and that's kind of the top of the value triangle, and that's where we need to focus.
Guess that's over to me. Hi, everyone. James Sandland here. First off, just thanks to Catriona and Foresight for the invitation to be here. Really great to have these kind of discussions. We don't get a lot of chance in government sometimes to share some of the things we're doing, and also just to kind of gauge feedback and have those discussions, which are always inspiring and help kind of rejig where we're going. So I lead our forest innovation and bioeconomy programs with the Ministry of Forests. Been in government now for, 15 years or so, and another 10 years in the forest sector. So I lead our innovation and bioeconomy programs. Innovation stuff, typically we focus on systems, process innovations, technology in the industry. And then on the bioeconomy side, it's more about bioproduct development and kind of new advanced bioproducts. So doing that for, oh God, 7 or 8 years now. And before that, I helped build our climate change program in the ministry. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for me. Look forward to the discussion, and hopefully I can contribute a little bit too. Thanks.
So just quickly, I'm David Sanguinetti. I'm on the Foresight side of things, doing the technical coordination of this Future Economy series, looking at the landscape of what roadmaps are there out there to advance the technologies that the province needs to achieve its Clean BC goals. On the personal side, I've got a sort of a soft spot for this particular sector because one of the very first clean tech companies I worked for was in the pyrolysis space, converting wood waste into energy. So I'm quite excited about this seminar and or session webinar, and really looking forward to the conversations we're going to have.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really looking forward to it as well. And so let's begin. I'll go into a quick presentation about the core clean tech cluster and about the research that David and I and the team have been working on over the past few months. So the core clean tech cluster is a new entity that has spun out of Foresight. Our mission is to support a clean economy and position BC as a global centre for innovation, talent and capital to scale clean technology and drive a clean economy. We do that through engaging with different types of stakeholders. We call it the Helix 5 model. And those stakeholders include universities, industry, investors, SMEs, and government as well. And so together we identify the gaps, we look for opportunities to close those gaps, whether it's around commercialization of tech, whether it's around marketing, whatever it might be, to be able to help scale and support clean technologies in the sector here in BC. The goals of the core clean tech cluster are to strengthen local and global partnerships to accelerate activities for a clean economy, to showcase BC as a place to invest in clean tech companies and projects. If you didn't already know, we have a number of companies here in the province, over 300, who are working across different sectors, including forestry, with various different technologies. We want to facilitate and engage stakeholders for impactful collaboration and clean tech projects in the province and also outside. We want to foster talent and skills for clean tech commercialization and scale up. So beyond just startups, how do we get these companies to grow, to be, to have major revenues and employ a lot of people in the province? And also to promote opportunities and programs to increase international exports. The sectors that the core clean tech cluster focus on are natural resources, transportation, agriculture and food, energy, built environment, and water. And what's very important to note that in natural resources, we include forestry, we include mining. It's quite broad, but we have the sector experience within our team to work within this sphere. So over the past few months, the team has been working on conducting a review of what roadmaps exist for the forestry sector to support climate change goals and to support the Clean BC goals. And so we have completed a snapshot of this roadmaps and approaches in use in the forestry sector in BC. And that is now available on our website, on the Core Clean Tech website. And we can also share it with you after this as part of our follow-up email. The presentation will be a short synopsis of this paper. So when we look at the forestry sector in BC, we want to know what the advantages are. And there's already a number of pieces in place that will help to succeed in driving a clean economy here. Firstly, we have an existing world-class innovation ecosystem. Think of FP Innovations, think of like other networks as well, who are really working and trying to figure out how to support innovation to maintain our competitiveness. We have an experienced and educated workforce in the sector. We have a tremendous amount of biomass supply. Forestry covers 50% of the land in BC. We do have a unique mix of forest resources and species, which lends itself to different types of products as well as specifications. And we also have networks and market-focused organizations who are supporting with the export development of forestry-related projects. products, whether that's Bio Alliance, who are looking at bioproducts, or Forestry Innovation Investments, who also look at engineered wood and lumber and things like that. What's important to note is that it is a huge employer in the province, but there's also, against the backdrop of the Clean BC goals, reduction targets of GHG emissions by 40%, 60%, 80% by 2050. How does the forestry sector play a role in this? And how can we leverage these advantages to make them into opportunities to help drive this and continue to support jobs as well? So in our research, we took a look at what roadmaps, programs, and initiatives that exist that support BC in terms of transferring to a forest bioeconomy and sustainable economy. We saw that there's a couple of strategies that already exist, more at the federal and national level. So that includes Canada's Bioeconomy strategy that was established by the Bioindustrial Innovation Canada. They're based out of Ontario. There's also the Forestry Bioeconomy Framework for Canada, which was set up by the Canadian Council of Forestry Ministers. And then we have a number of different standards and certifications, whether that's a Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which is a nonprofit org who has certifications, same for the Sustainable Biomass Program, and the European Organization for Packaging and Environment. This is quite interesting, particularly from the export perspective. And then in BC, we have the policies that exist include forestry stewardship plans, which help to figure out different types of aspects that we work on here. So what are the observations here that our research team found? Well, we found that forestry is a low margin, highly competitive industry. And so in that case, it means that companies are looking for GHG reduction solutions. They recognize the need to reduce emissions, but also that have an economic benefit and a return on investment. There's an opportunity here to adopt clean tech and to reduce costs as well, therefore supporting the economics of it all. We also found that lime kilns used in the production of kraft pulp were identified as a large source of GHGs for the forestry sector. But what we know is there isn't a cost-effective long-term solution to overcome this. And so is there something that can be done about it? We found that the pellet sector is looking to transform into more of a fiber industry, and that builds on value-added bioproducts. We found that various transportation modes and equipment that's used in the forestry sector is diesel fueled, emitting GHGs. Is there an opportunity to electrify some of this equipment or to use other types of equipment? And we also found that there's a need for a shift from the R&D, research and demonstration part of the bioproducts, part to support commercialization of actual solutions. So the areas of opportunity that we identified that can support forestry becoming part of the clean economy in BC is a couple of different things. Firstly, the operational aspect. That includes reducing carbon intensity of operations. Secondly, on carbon sequestration, supporting sustainable forest management and wildfire mitigation. And lastly, but not least, the bioeconomy. Converting wood-based biomass into value-added products, whether that's for transportation fuels, electricity, biochemicals, bioplastics, biomaterials, and also engineered wood products as well. So in this slide here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the bioeconomy opportunity. And so what we see here is that with bioproducts, you actually require less amounts of the biomass to create a higher value material. This is quite interesting, particularly as an export opportunity, and particularly as we figure out how best to use our forest resources and make sure that we're maximizing value for what we're exporting and developing here in the province. And this pyramid actually came from the government of British Columbia. So if anybody has any questions, they can put them in the Q&A chat for James. So on the recommendations, how are we going to bridge these gaps that we've highlighted here in the short report and through our research? Firstly, there is a need for a forestry technology roadmap. And this will help to guide the sector to decarbonize and transition to a value-added bioeconomy. Secondly, the need for innovation programs. You know, we're seeing a lot of R&D and research and other aspects being developed either in-house, the forestry companies, or at university level. There's an opportunity here to really figure out how to take that into commercialization and make sure it's driven by industry needs. So there's opportunities for different programs like industry challenges, export support, policy forums to help really drive project-focused investment and to scale these technologies and bioproducts and other products into a higher technology readiness level. This can also support wider manufacturing of biomaterials and biochemicals as well in the province. Procurement. A recommendation, and this also was referenced in the bioeconomy framework for Canada as well, that governments can help to de-risk technology adoption by becoming customers for novel bioeconomy products. We also think there's a need, and we do recommend that there is some focused research and effort to find cost-effective solutions to reduce GHG emissions from pulp mill lime kilns. And lastly, on market demand. We see there's a big need to engage with industry outside of BC and more internationally to really understand what's the demand for these types of bioproducts, whether it's bioplastics or alternative materials. How can we really drive demand for that and make sure we're supporting the export of these solutions as they are reaching higher TRL levels and become commercial? And how do we do that in tandem with others across Canada to make sure we're using all the major resources available? Thank you. I'll pass it over to David now for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Catriona. So to dive into these recommendations, I'd like to get the feedback of the group first on do these resonate? Are these the right recommendations in order to get BC to the point that we really have a thriving bioeconomy industry that drives the province back? And I should reveal, I grew up here, and when I was a kid, I was taught that forestry drove the provincial economy. That's no longer true. I think we could get there again as a bioeconomy if we go in the right direction. Are these recommendations going to get us there? Let's start with you, Neil, and then work our way through.
Sure. Well, thanks, David. So my take on the recommendations, I think they're all pretty good. I think certainly a roadmap can be a key way to help us focus here in BC. Put all the pieces together. That value pyramid is a long and complex hill to climb. So if we can put a story together that focuses on the attributes in BC, you know, we do have a limited quantity of fiber, but it's very high quality. And if we can maximize its value, especially if we can, you know, find cost-effective ways to get residues from harvest and manufacturing to help with the fiber supply. We have significant pulp mill infrastructure here in BC. We have strong research capability here at FPI and also at UBC Bioproducts Institute and the efforts that are going on with the BC Bio Alliance. And we've got a strong entrepreneurial and innovative mindset. So if we can put that together into a story, you know, the markets are really international. So we need a path to support significant investment required. If we put that BC story together and maybe use EDC and BC Trade to help us reach out to the international market players and tell that story, that kind of leads us to the recommendation around project-focused investments. And if we can sit down with market players and establish a solid value proposition around some of these, around performance, around cost, around sustainability, bring in the rest of the value chain, the forestry companies, the development partners, BC and the federal government, and get some multi-year initiatives going to take some of these technologies to market. We're going to need probably a higher percentage of government funding at the beginning, but as we reduce technology and market risk, the industry funding can increase. And when we get to that commercialization phase, I do agree also that it would be great to have governments as first customers. It certainly brings, you know, credibility to the projects and a first market position that can entice other market customers in. There's an old adage that says the best investment is from customers. So I guess I'll stop there.
Excellent, thank you. So James, what would be your take on this? Are these recommendations ringing true for you? I know you've been beating the drum for a while on the bioeconomy in BC. Is this going to get us there?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think the recommendations are good ones, and they're on the right track. Some context piece that kind of help understand that pyramid that we put together. So while British Columbia, we all know, most of our land base is forest, and there is quite a bit of forest biomass. It's one of our biggest resources out there. It's a high cost biomass. So when you're comparing things to other jurisdictions, which might be into ethanol and corn and papyrus or eucalyptus, whatever, softwood biomass is a high cost biomass. So slow growing, all those kind of things. The other thing to keep in mind is in Canada, we have the highest delivered log costs in Canada too. So it's there, but it's costly. So and most people in the industry understand that. So part of the roadmap and maybe the pyramid as a bit of a guide or a compass to that is trying to maximize the value of the products that we can create from that biomass. That's going to give you greater margins to work with, hopefully absorb some of that cost. So that's really important. So one thing I will also say with the pyramid, that doesn't mean that we have to go just to the top. There can be opportunities for different bioproducts, whether it's biofuels, bioenergy, biochemicals, or biomaterials like textiles and plastics. But the sequencing is very important. If you start with the high value ones at the top of the pyramid, you're going to maximize your returns that you can then reinvest in other processes, building on infrastructure here, and kind of take other products as you go. So kind of a portfolio approach. However, if you start in other places like, say, a biofuel or bioenergy, you're limited in what you can do in terms of value added after that. The margins are smaller there, so you're not going to have a lot of revenue to reinvest to the next innovation. You're probably going to be challenged to get large volumes of biomass with the lower product value. And obviously, if you take cellulose, these long chains of wood fiber, and break it into a fuel, you've kind of stopped your roadmap in terms of value add. Chemical engineers will say you can then link CH4 molecules together and build long chains, but from an economic and energy perspective, it doesn't really make sense to break down these fibers to small levels like fuels and energy and redo it. So that's really important too. The other thing I would say is our NBSK fibers do actually have inherent competitive advantages compared to other sources of biomass. So if you look, lots of us look at biomass markets and look at fuels as a really big market, even bioenergy. But if you dig deeper, less than 1% of global biofuel markets comes from wood biomass. And that's really because there's a competitive disadvantage there. So slow growing, costly, that kind of thing. Now, that's not to say there's no opportunity for biofuel in BC. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there are inherent advantages with our softwood fibers, lightweighting, strength, those types of things that can outcompete other sources of biomass. So if we're looking at that roadmap, in my humble view, aiming for those top value opportunities, which also have a little bit less risk to them because we can outcompete other sources of biomass. If we can build a roadmap that kind of is foundational on those aspects, then with that extra revenue, those competitive advantages, we can really maximize the other use. There's always going to be waste and residuals from every manufacturing process. So those are the kinds of things you recycle into biofuels, bioenergy, etc. So key message, it's not obviously silver bullet. It's looking at kind of the higher value ones, maybe building off of that as we go, but always looking at that kind of portfolio approach of different bioproduct opportunities. So hopefully that helps kind of contextualize things, David.
Absolutely, thank you very much. So now, Gurminder, you're doing it. You're in the biochemical space. What about these recommendations? Are they going to help move you forward?
Yes, definitely. I think they're definitely on point. In particular, I should have turned my phone off here, but yeah, again, having a roadmap to basically chart the path forward. Innovation programs are active in these already. Government procurement and demonstration projects is something I've always said all along that could definitely help. Again, as a province, again, we have very good resources, but the market is not going to be here. The markets are going to be elsewhere. So we're going to be exporting these products. So to have the ability to possibly have government participation for demonstration projects, the Brock Commons project, for example, in engineered wood, that got world-renowned attention, world attention. It was right here in BC. It was a demonstration project, and it was received quite well. So we could have some programs, again, demonstration programs that utilize forest-based biochemicals, forest-based biomaterials that would definitely help time to market. The focused research component of this, obviously we're in this day to day, so I see a lot of this happening already, but again, more to be done. And the last point on the list here, again, market demand, just to echo my colleagues' comments, the markets are going to be elsewhere. And aside from market demand, I put forward that we need to do more work in making it market awareness. So if we were to sort of survey, procurement folks that are focused on sustainable products, I'm not sure if BC would be on top of their list. I would suggest Scandinavia would be. We may hit some markets, but I think if we get more market awareness that we are a source of sustainable bio-based materials, that would definitely help companies such as ours and the overall sector. And I'll just finish off, if we go back to the pyramid, I think it's very good that, good job on the government's part to present it this way. But the one thing we still should be more focused on is, again, the lower part of the pyramid. So we're talking about the upper part, and we're active basically in the biomaterial space. We want to get into the biochemical side of things as well. But the reason we can successfully and economically produce these biomaterials is because we're starting with a processed material. We're starting with kraft pulp, for our example, to be specific. But that material has already gone basically from the forest to a sawmill to a pulp mill, so that the value chain there definitely needs support. So if that value chain goes away, the supply chain, and our access to very cost-effective input material to produce nanocellulose is gone, then that entire value proposition is compromised. The same thing goes for biochemicals, and I would suggest the same thing goes for engineered wood products. So the top three materials, the opportunities we have on this pyramid are definitely relying on the infrastructure that's already in place and the sawmills and the pulp mills that are here. So if we can improve their competitiveness, both from a financial perspective and both from an environmental and sustainability perspective, that's going to benefit the sector overall.
Excellent, thank you. We're getting some questions in, but I'm going to jump in ahead of some of them with everybody's talked now about export markets and the markets elsewhere. We need to demonstrate here, but then sell outside the province, which is exactly what we do when it comes to forestry and pulp and paper. Where are those markets? Who's buying? When you look at the pyramid and you look at the top really high value products, where are they going and who wants them? So
maybe I can start with that one.
Sure.
And I think it was actually captured in the study that you guys just put out. In the roadmap section here, I've got it open in front of me. Basically, industry companies that are basically having industry sustainability plans and strategies. So you guys highlight PepsiCo, Danone, Tetra Pak, all add on Nestle, all add on IKEA, all add on. There's several other companies that have definitive sustainability plans on paper. And what we need to do is get in front of these companies and make them aware that BC is a contender, and we're going to have products available to them to help them meet their sustainability initiatives. So the demand is in Europe, the demand is in the US, the demand is in Asia. It is already there. We just have to basically get in front of these companies and offer the solutions that we have available right now, and then listen to them to see what they're wanting and see if we can actually meet some of the material challenges they're going to be facing. For example, in particular in packaging. Cellulose-based packaging, I believe, can offer a great solution, possibly even lignin-based packaging. But we need to get in front of these companies and talk to their sustainability officers and the folks that are in charge of these plans, and start working with them to see how we can get some of our material from BC and help them meet their sustainability challenges.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody want to add on to that, or?
I'd just like to add too that we certainly see that as a key area. Food packaging, the Danones, the Tetra Paks of the world are very, very interested in biodegradable products and getting away from single-use plastics. And you know, relationships are absolutely key. So getting back to Gurminder's point about supporting the mills, you know, one of the things that we're focused on is using a slightly higher value-added pulp material in biocomposites for biodegradable materials. And when you look at biodegradable plastics, you know, relationships are absolutely key. So if you can start building those relationships with the major brand owners, as well as the plastics manufacturers, the PHA manufacturers, you can start to build those relationships and actually move up the value chain. Because if, just as an example, you can start with pulp and PHA mixed together, but the PHA producers are eventually going to be looking for non-food-based feedstock. And wood sugars are obviously a great area for that to take place. So, and if you've already built the relationships with the PHA providers and the brand owners, you know, you're halfway there. So relationships are absolutely key here.
Thank you. James, you jumped in here answering a question in the chat about the different parts of the tree. That's an interesting question, because I know one of the things that I've actually heard as your ultimate boss, Diane Nichols, talking about is, you know, the slash that's left behind, and we need to find a use for that. How do we do that in BC to take advantage of the full fiber basket that we have available and not leave a bunch behind?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we've struggled with for a long time in BC. Some of it, we were discussing this yesterday, Gurminder, and we came from the land of plenty. So traditionally in the forest sector, there's lots of trees, and we had kind of a saw log centric view of the forest. So we'd look at a stand and think of how many 2x4s we could get out of it. And that was kind of the limit of our value proposition, you know, 20, 30 years ago. Nowadays, things have obviously changed, and with the research we're doing with the UBC Bioproducts Institute, FBI, and others, you can do pretty much anything with wood cellulose. So anything that you see in the supermarket and the shopping mall that's made out of plastic, it could be made out of wood cellulose. So part of it is changing our view about the forest resource, and then other ways of kind of categorizing that. So we are building what we're calling a forest biomass information system in the province here, working with the industry and some of the partners I talked about. So looking at, you know, the branches, the bark, the pulpwood component, the sawlog component, each of those components of the tree are more suitable for other things. So things like mass timber, which is a big priority in government right now, that you can only really get that from the sawlog component. But as Gurminder spoke about, a lot of folks in the industry, we talk about an integrated sector. So that kind of flow of biomass from sawmill to pulp mill, et cetera. But with these new opportunities, there's just more opportunity to add value to each one of those kind of streams of biomass. So even things like bark and non-wovens and products like that are high value opportunities. So when we think about slash is typically a mix of bark, branches. Sometimes there's some pulp log mixed in there. And I've seen pictures where I would probably say maybe there might even be a saw log mixed in there. I don't know, it's hard to tell from the pictures. It's certainly waste, and we got to remove waste from our vernacular. So part of it is obviously licensees have a wildfire mitigation objective they need to manage. However, it's about, you know, like how do we process and manage that supply, that fiber supply, that biomass, so the next user can either get it and not pull things out of a pile, which is way too costly, or how do we bring it all in and kind of create those partnerships within the sector, or even with new entrants that can look at, you know, the old proverb of one man's garbage is another man's gold. So part of it is kind of changing our view of the forest sector, and I think the bioeconomy helps do that. We still need to do a lot of work there. The economy and costs, right? Like saw logs, you're only going to pay for some of that to get into the mill. So looking at these other opportunities to build your margin to bring more of that biomass in is going to be really key. And then kind of looking at the tree beyond just a saw log centric view, like looking at that kind of the tree is there, just like a butcher would look at a cow. I mean, you don't just take a cow and turn it into a bunch of hot dogs, right? You look at ribeyes and T-bones and all that kind of thing and try and maximize your value. So having that view of the tree and the forest, I think it will help. And I think the bioeconomy starts to move us along that pathway. Does that help answer your question?
Absolutely, thank you. So just looking at some of the questions that have come in here, there's most recent one, but perhaps a little bit contentious, but I'll go through it because I think this could be an interesting conversation. Do we have a case study on mass timber? How did BC miss getting companies to locate CLT manufacturing facilities here? Seems like it was a natural fit to locate here with our proximity to US and supply of quality fiber. Might help us to understand what not to do in other new products. So
yeah,
a little bit of a loaded question, but let's see if we can get it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we do have mass timber companies in British Columbia. So we've got Structure Lam in Penticton, Structure Craft in Abbotsford. Kalashnikov Lumber has traditionally been a sawmiller, has moved into that space. So they're going to be creating CLT and glulam. There's Galloway Lumber. There's about half dozen at least right now in British Columbia. So we're doing okay there. There could be more. I mean, one of the challenges I have with mass timber, which I think there is lots of opportunity there, but it narrows the scope of the opportunity. So mass timber is typically the structural element of a new building, but there's lots of other things, as most people know, in your homes, from cabinetry to flooring underlay. Some of the interesting projects we're doing with FPI on biomass space foam insulation, by trying to get rid of that toxic petrochemical stuff that you see people spraying in. So part of it is that creating more opportunities on the non-structural part, because with our existing companies now in CLT and other manufacturers, we can pretty much meet the demand in British Columbia. So the big market pull is not BC, it's elsewhere. And most of those companies are filling their order sheets with projects down in the States. And I think that'll continue. We can do more things probably, like Gurminder suggested on Brock Commons. But maybe take a little bit of different slant on that. Like you don't necessarily see things like biomass foam insulation, but there's other building products where you could have like a, close to 100% biomass building. Even with some kind of new bioconcrete, there's lots of opportunities there. So it's we do have lots of studies on CLT and demand and producers, and we have capacity here. So I think we're doing okay on there. But to me, the bigger opportunity is more on broadening people's awareness of some of the other opportunities, which is the non-structural side of the built environment. So it's kind of a half answer, David, but I'm happy to pick that conversation up, or somebody can email me more questions if they like.
Fair enough. So here's an interesting one. Would any of the recommendations change in the light of COVID-19? And we did make these recommendations in the middle of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. So my short answer would be probably not, but I think it's worth diving into, because are there going to be more opportunities for the sector, like the development of Made in Canada, so a specific reference to the single-use face mask that you were talking about, Neil, or the push for a greener, sustainable recovery. Neil, are you seeing any of that?
Well, we're certainly seeing it, on the face mask side. We've done a tremendous amount of work over the last 6 months to essentially develop a mask that had a center, a fiber center and polypropylene on the inside and outside. So about 40% biodegradable that kind of met the barrier mask requirements, and we're pushing it as close as we can to surgical mask requirements as well. And then on top of that, we're focused on trying to move towards 100% biodegradable. But the real focus was the drive from the federal government to essentially have a biodegradable answer, a biodegradable mask that could be made in Canada. And that was of course driven partly by COVID. So yeah, we certainly have seen those kinds of things happening.
Maybe I'll just add to that. Again, this is something that where the forest industry, in particular the fiber producers, have really stepped up. The original, I guess, challenge or sort of mandate from the government was to have PPE, personal protective equipment, in particular masks, manufactured in Canada, and there wasn't necessarily a need for sustainability. So they were actually fine. The government was looking even to use synthetic materials in these mask manufacturing. That is taking place. But what happened since then and along the way is the forest industry stepped up and said, you know what, we can meet this challenge. We can meet these targets, so we're going to try to meet these targets with respect to filtration efficiency. But at the same time, we're going to make them from sustainable and renewable materials that are biodegradable. So we'll have the same performance as synthetic material. We'll have the bonus of sustainability and Canadian fiber.
Yeah, certainly it's a good story. Ties into a related question here. Is it not the case that any GHG reduction technology is best utilized locally? When export markets are utilized, the benefits are undone. Should not the focus be internal markets where we can offset against polluting industry? So, I mean, that's an interesting philosophy that basically says, you know, we're trying to create a local economy, try to minimize transportation because there's inherent waste every time you transport something. Once again, it's an interesting question. Obviously, we've built our province as based on export markets. What do you guys think on that that question?
Well, I think it's always better if you can have a domestic market, but I think the reality says that for the most part, and especially when you look at the forestry sector that is used to significant volumes, you know, and any project has to have significant volumes to be meaningful to the sector. It's going to be an export market. But by the same token, that doesn't mean there couldn't be a significant domestic component.
I might also, from my side, looking at it holistically, I would also suggest, since we have a type of fiber that's hard to find in the rest of the world, that does actually produce products that therefore can't really be made in the rest of the world, perhaps you could almost altruistically say that we owe it to the rest of the world to provide this to them. Although, I mean, I realize that's a arguably self-serving argument, but I think you could stand behind that. Another question here on forest certification. What can we do on forest certification to ensure the BC bioeconomy is truly sustainable? So, James, I'll turn this to you and perhaps rephrase it slightly. Is the forest certification in BC good enough to ensure that it is truly sustainable? Because it's certainly a marketing benefit if it is.
Yeah, well, my view on sustainability is it's kind of a continuous improvement model. So we should never be totally satisfied with where we're at and try and keep getting better. In terms of bioeconomy, I think it's important to keep doing the research and informing folks of that value stream or supply chain. So if we're in a situation where we're cutting green trees to make energy or fuel, that we're shooting ourselves in the foot on sustainability. So that value chain moving from sawlog, taking the sawlog material out of the tree, turning it into CLT, engineered wood products, or dimensional lumber, that's going to store carbon for 30, 40, 50 plus years on that product lifespan. And then you're taking some of the waste from that and creating these other products. So things like biomaterials and plastics and other biomaterial end use applications are going to store carbon for a long time too. So if we maintain that kind of value chain or supply chain where we're maximizing value, and when I think about the bioeconomy, I try to use the triple bottom line value. So social in terms of jobs and social benefits, economic value, the product value pyramid that we have here, and then your embodied carbon and GHG aspects. So I think we've got a little bit of work to do there on the education awareness around that, because I don't know all of the other jurisdictions and how they use their biomass, but I know BC and Canada has a leadership position there, so we want to maintain that and just show that how we're using our biomass is we're thinking about things like GHGs, embodied carbon, and the carbon neutrality is really a term we don't use anymore. We talk about carbon payback period. So if it takes 80 years to grow a tree and then you just chop it and turn it into fuel or energy, you're actually can be worse than fossil fuels. However, if you take that tree and use that value chain approach I spoke about, where you're creating long-lived wood products that are storing carbon, then you're enhancing the carbon resource of the tree, so to speak. So it's a tricky question in terms of certification. I'm not sure they're looking at that aspect of it. It's more on how we grow trees. It's not my area of expertise, really. So that's about all I could offer to answer the question, but I'll think about it more.
Fair enough. Anybody else have thoughts? So I'm going to throw out there, we've got a question here, who's going to create the roadmap? Now, I mean, I have been involved in creating roadmaps in other sectors, and the very short answer is if you're going to do it properly, you're going to have a lot of people involved. But Neil, you certainly at FP Innovations are involved in some of this. Who do you think needs to be involved in creating the roadmap?
Well, again, I think it needs to be pretty inclusive, right to the market players, because you can't create a roadmap to nowhere. You have to have, you know, a solid value proposition. So we need to be reaching out to market players. We need you know, understand the overall value chain and the players in that value chain. We need the forestry companies here in BC involved. You know, I think the BC Alliance, BioAlliance has done a pretty good job at getting the forestry members together. And we just need to continue that process. It needs to be everybody. It needs to be governments. It needs to be, you know, groups like FP Innovation and UBC. It needs to be market players and value chain players and the forestry companies. Everybody needs to pitch in.
Yeah, I'd agree. If I can just kind of build on that.
Please.
Yeah. I think we'd have I kind of use the analogy, I guess, if everybody knows I'm an analogy guy now. If you think about a puzzle, we're kind of working on one corner of the roadmap or the puzzle with the industry. So the BC Bioproduct Alliance with the main pulp producers there in the industry, FPI, UBC, bunch of other stakeholders. So we're kind of working away on that part of the puzzle. So we've got a decent understanding based on infrastructure we have in that value chain we've talked about, from sawmill to pulp mill to other. Where I think we're weak on is the market demand side. So your last bullet there. And Neil was just talking about this. So the non-traditional stakeholders, the end use applications. So BASF, DuPont, Apple, who knows, like those guys that are taking, if you look at your tablet, your iPad, it's plastic and metal. How do we work with those guys to say, hey, you could create this out of wood cellulose? And that's part of the puzzle that it in my mind anyway, is a bunch of pieces with different shapes and colors, and we don't know how to put that together. So, you know, that market demand, working with the non-traditional stakeholders to understand that. And so we can get that part of the puzzle going and then make that bridge from corner to corner. So I think that's our weak spot, not necessarily our blind spot. I think like Neil's talked about it. I know some of the industry are thinking about that too, but we haven't really galvanized an approach to bring that group in and show the value proposition to them. They're not going to just do it because it's good for BC or it's good for our climate goals. There has to be a value in it for those companies. And that's something I think we could work on together to try and create that appetite or that opportunity.
Okay, cool. So to build on that, Gurminder, there's a question here. Is there a sense BC companies in the sector are currently working well together through the biowood product supply value chain, or could more be done to support cooperation along with competition? So, if we're working together to create our roadmaps, then there's other places perhaps we could work together. Is that happening in a way that it should? I know performance biofilaments are a sort of an example of that, but maybe you can speak to that more.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that happening, but always more could be done. Again, we're talking specifically about BC today, but again, our commercial plant is going to be constructed in Quebec. Our markets are international, so we do have some national applications within Canada, but most of our markets are overseas, whether it's US, Europe, or Asia. So if we can work closer with other BC companies, say for example in complementary products, we get a lot of questions from our prospective customers in looking at other bio-based materials that we just don't offer right now. So whether we bring those into our pipeline or we partner with another company, for example, lignin-based additives in some of the markets that we're developing for nanocellulose. It's a question we get asked quite often. So whether we partner with somebody to help bring some other biochemicals to market, or we partner with a producer that is producing material that we can bring into our pipeline and bring new forest-based biochemicals to market. Those are all opportunities that we can take advantage of, and we could be doing more within the province.
Excellent, thank you. So self-serving question now is we're getting close to the end, but segueing nicely from what you just said, Gurminder, we could do some more in the province. What can CORE and Foresight, particularly the CORE cluster, do to help on that?
Maybe I'll start there. I think continuing the dialogue. Again, I think a roadmap for this discussion and the work that CORE has done has probably been long overdue within the province. Perhaps it was done in bits and pieces, and sometimes studies are done or just get put on a shelf. But continuing to maintain focus on the fact that we do want to get into some of these higher value products while supporting the existing industry. We do want to improve the overall economic and environmental sustainability of the sector. So continuing that focus, helping put BC on the map globally. So that's something else that you guys can help with. Again, it's not really market demand, but it's more market awareness. So if you conference in Scandinavia, the interior of BC, they're going to go, oh yeah, that's where that biochemicals plant is going to be, or that's where we can get this from. So market awareness from that front is something that CORE, I think, definitely can help with.
I think something that I could add too is that, Foresight has done a lot of work with other sectors. And, so we don't want to just reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. If there's probably lots that we can learn from other sectors, not to mention there's a lot of overlap, particularly with ag and some of the other sectors.
Cool. James, anything from your end?
Yeah, I'd agree with those two gentlemen for sure. Yeah, I think the market demand side with the non-traditional stakeholders is a piece for sure. I'm not sure how procurement is going to, in terms of the bullets on the screen here, is going to play a huge role. Our purchasing power in government's pretty small. We're a small market. So maybe that's kind of a hybrid of the demonstration aspect blended with procurement. So Gurminder spoke about that with the Brock Commons building. So that might be something to consider in that one. But yeah, kind of forgot what the question was.
We're looking at how CORE can help push things forward.
Right. Yeah, sorry, thanks. So I think, collaboration and partnerships are important. So we've got a bit of that. If we can add to that with CORE and Foresight, that would be great. Neil made a great comment about learning from other sectors that have already done this. That's a big piece. I think you guys could play a unique role in bridging that gap to the end use application market demand side. There's going to be some industry players that have their toe in the water there, and there's a competitiveness thing there for sure. But I know a lot of companies don't have the resources to do that too, so that could be a huge role for this group.
Excellent, thank you. And really quickly, I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question, interesting one here. What's your sense of the general public's awareness of opportunities in forest bioeconomy to reduce GHG emissions, either with providing new sources or revenue to Canadian businesses? And how does this help us moving forward?
So, do you want me to start? I'll try to be
Sure.
quick. I think we still got a long ways to go on awareness. We do monitor things, so I think companies are starting to get it. So there was a question earlier about how do you define bioeconomy, and the simplest definition I could provide, which is similar to how UBC coins it and some of our partners in Scandinavia, is simply using sustainable biomass to displace petrochemicals throughout our economy. So plastics, single-use plastics and straws, that kind of thing. So really, that's how we view the bioeconomy. So there are companies out there that they're kind of doing it, but I don't know that the public really gets the value for it. So one example would be Patagonia. They've got a Xylex or Xylene, I forget what it's called, wetsuit that's made out of cactus fiber in place of neoprene, which is a petrochemical. You got company here in Victoria, Sitka, that's now called Ecologist. So they're moving to all natural fibers and trying to get rid of polyesters. So I think companies are starting to catch on. It might not be this for the same reasons we're talking about, but that's really the awareness piece. I think there's nuggets of it that people get, but we need to kind of crystallize that and kind of sell it, because I think BC could be a real leader in this opportunity.
Excellent, thank you. I completely agree. As I said at the beginning, I really I see an opportunity here for to get back to that place where we were when I was a kid, that the forest sector, now renamed the bioeconomy sector, truly drives the economy in this province, and it would be in a clean tech way. So thank you to all three of you, Neil, James, Gurminder. Really appreciate all of your thoughts, and I'll pass it back to Catriona.
Thank you, David, and all the panelists. It was a really insightful conversation. So as for next steps, if you haven't already, please do take a look at the Core Cleantech Cluster Strategy Report. Take a look at what the Forestry report that we've put out today as well. If you're interested in updates, please sign up on the website and we'll make sure you get on the newsletter and become part of the Core and Foresight networks as well. We do have an upcoming webinar on water and the water ecosystem on the 14th of October. We'll be in touch with links if you signed up today. And if anybody has any questions, please do get in touch. If you want to connect with the panelists, I'm sure they'd be very happy to speak with you if you want some of those connections. So thanks again for joining us today. We had 80 participants. Really glad to see that this is a thriving industry, and we hope it continues to be with all of your participation going forward. Thank you and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.